welcome. I'm Philip Brossard, and here's what happened this week. The U.S. Biden administration has asked Congress for more than $100 billion in emergency funding. $2 billion of that is meant for the Indo-Pacific, but analysts say it's not enough to deter China from increasing its military presence in the region. For more on this, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Alex Velez-Green, a defense analyst from the Heritage Foundation based in Washington, D.C.
The Biden administration is seeking $105 billion for emergency funding, and $2 billion of that is supposed to go to the Indo-Pacific. Is that enough?
This request from the Biden administration for Taiwan and for the Indo-Pacific is an absolute joke. You know, when you look at the magnitude of the request, this is a $106 billion request, of which only $2 billion are going to go, at least reportedly, to Taiwan, and in a manner that could substantially improve our ability to deter China quickly in the near term. We're talking about the next few years. It's a pittance. It's a fraction of what's required. Also, this is something, there should be alarm bells going off in Taipei looking at this request. And this should be an absolute end, frankly, to the Taiwanese government saying, yes, the United States should keep prioritizing Ukraine and these other areas over us. That's just not going to cut it anymore.
The United States has prioritized funding for Ukraine and now Israel because of active conflicts there. But is there a conversation to be had about preventing a conflict in Taiwan and increasing funding in the Indo-Pacific?
So for the last year, I've spoken to administration officials from the State Department, from the Department of Defense, from the White House, and that is one of the answers they provided, that Ukraine is at war in particular. Obviously now Israel's at war as well. And these hot conflicts need to be the primary focus for American aid. But this general argument that, because there's a war here, this is where we need to drive all of our attention and resources to the exclusion of our priority theater and really the most dangerous flashpoint in the world for the United States today, it just does not make sense. I mean, the fact is, the reason we want to send resources to arm Taiwan, to strengthen U.S. force posture in that region now as quickly as possible, is to avoid a war. Because if a war does happen, the likelihood is it's going to be potentially as devastating as the Second World War.
With these two conflicts in Ukraine and Israel happening, is the United States distracted in its operations in the Indo-Pacific?
It's a great question. The United States can no longer reliably deter or defeat Chinese aggression against Taiwan. That increasingly certainly has been my assessment for some time. That it seems to be an assessment increasingly shared among analysts outside of the U.S. government. And you can see a little bit of why just in the report you mentioned. China, say what you will, but the Chinese Communist Party has been investing heavily in the People's Liberation Army and associated forces. It has routinely modernized and expanded its military capacity at rates that exceed what the U.S. intelligence community has expected. We're talking about conventional forces. We're talking about nuclear forces. We're talking about forces, civilian vessels, for instance, that could be commandeered to support an invasion operation. All these things are happening. All of them are happening at a scale that often surpasses, again, what the United States expected. Meanwhile, as you saw in the supplemental request, the United States is not treating this as the urgent, dangerous threat that it is.
That was Alex Velez-Green, a defense analyst from the Heritage Foundation, speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon. Missile defense is an important component of Taiwan's overall military strategy. Now that's why the country's armed forces are looking at Israel's Iron Dome system and its use in the Israel-Hamas War. Jaime Ocon has this report as well.
These are rockets being intercepted by Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome. They were launched from the Palestinian territories just across the border from Israel by the Hamas militant group. And the short-range weapons have tested the limits of the system's effectiveness. Israeli forces had previously praised the Iron Dome for successfully intercepting more than 95% of these rockets. But when Hamas raided Israel on October 7th, they fired more than 5,000 of them, overwhelming the Iron Dome's capabilities and killing civilians.
Despite the relative primitiveness of that technology, the sheer number of rockets fired in a concentrated period of time overwhelmed the Iron Dome's ability to deal with these missiles.
The attack showed the limits of the Iron Dome's defensive capabilities and caught the attention of militaries across the globe especially here in Taiwan. Analysts say that China could use its arsenal of advanced missiles if it takes action against Taiwan, a country it sees as part of its territory. But would a system like the Iron Dome help Taiwan defend against an attack from China?
And if we are talking about Taiwan, for Taiwan's case, so for example, longer range rockets, faster rockets, and land attack ballistic missiles, like they coming in very fast from a high altitude, things like that, you have to rely on the Patriot, on the Tiangong 3.
Taiwan uses two main missile defense systems, the US-made Patriot system and the domestically made Tiangong or Skybow system. Range is important when looking at how militaries defend their cities. Israel's Iron Dome system can only intercept short-range targets like rockets. Taiwan's Patriot 2 and Skybow systems have much longer ranges and can take out faster, more advanced missiles and even aircraft.
The current version of Iron Dome, it can only intercept incomings with a maximum range of up to 70 kilometers. So the Taiwan Strait is the narrowest point, is almost twice as wide as that. So there is zero utility for Taiwan to deploy the current Iron Dome systems on its main island.
While analysts agree that Taiwan does not need the Iron Dome, Taiwan's military wants to improve the way it uses its existing systems. It's created a task force to study the Israel-Hamas conflict and learn how to best position these systems.
I know that Taiwan is going to try to see what lessons it can draw from the war between Israel and Hamas. But in the case of Taiwan, it's going to be fighting against a very advanced military, not a group of terrorists that is embedding themselves in civilian neighborhoods with tunnels and things of that nature.
And while the war between Hamas and Israel might be different than a potential conflict between China and Taiwan, Taiwan's military will still be watching closely and trying to improve its defense strategy. James Lin and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Authorities in Taiwan have identified 5 people suspected of storing military-grade munitions in a gangster's warehouse. 4 of them are military officers. Leslie Liao has the story.
The US-made Stinger missile is a portable air defense weapon used to shoot down low-flying aircraft. These weapons are relatively cheap, mobile, and can take down hardware worth hundreds of times what they cost. This makes them an important tool in Taiwan's defensive planning against China, a country that claims Taiwan as its own. But it's not just the military that's interested in Stingers. In March, authorities raided the warehouse of a criminal gang and found a used Stinger missile pod and thousands of rounds of small arms ammunition. They traced the equipment back to a Taiwanese Marine Corps brigade in Taoyuan in the country's north. Authorities questioned 5 suspects in the case. All but one of them are military officers.
讯后就其中被告一人交保新台币10万元，其余的被告市民的部分，那认为涉嫌贪污治罪条例那向桃园地方法院申请羁押。
On Tuesday, the Taoyuan court ruled that 2 of the remaining 4 suspects will be kept in custody. One will be released on bail and the other set free. The Marine Corps has confirmed that the discovered pod is part of a Stinger missile system. It says it will fully cooperate with the prosecutor's investigation and severely punish anyone found responsible. Devin Tsai, Eason Chen, and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's High Court has sentenced a retired Air Force colonel to 20 years in prison for spying for China. The retired colonel, surnamed Liu, and 6 active duty officers were indicted in January for violating Taiwan's national security laws. Liu was found guilty of recruiting the Naval and Air Force officers over an 8-year period. He was paid over $500,000 US for information on Taiwan's military, specifically on aircraft and warships. Lithuania and Taiwan have agreed to work to improve financial and healthcare cooperation. The representatives signed a memorandum of understanding on medical and health cooperation and announced an agreement on taxation. That deal could pave the way for more investment by eliminating double taxation and tackling tax dodging. Lithuania and Taiwan have forged closer ties after agreeing to open representative offices in 2021. The latest MOU is the fourth the two countries have signed this year. Nurses took to the streets of Taipei this week to protest conditions they say are hellish. They want the government to fix problems that lead many nurses to quit the industry, leaving a heavier burden on those who remain. John Van Trieste reports.
Nurses and radiologists marched through Taipei to show their anger at a system they say isn't working. The unions represented at this protest say working as a nurse has become hell, and some of the marchers have put on ghoulish costumes to drive this point home. 320,000 people in Taiwan have nursing licenses, but only around 190,000 actually work as nurses. A big reason for this gap is low wages that lead many interested in nursing to give up on the field. Some marchers say anyone trying to get a raise runs into a never-ending bureaucratic loop.
医院会说你的健保的总额就是这样一点点，我怎么有办法帮你加薪？但是呢，跟卫福部讲，卫福部就说啊，这我没有办法干涉私人医院的这个薪酬的这个规划。
Nurses' unions are demanding an end to this. They want both a pay raise and for it to be covered with more funding for the national health insurance system. But that's not all. The nursing shortage means potentially dangerous overwork, something that's potentially dangerous not just for nurses, but for patients too.
一个大夜照顾到18甚至20床，那有的人可能超过接近25。
That's where the union's other two demands, no overwork and better workplace safety, come in. The hell-themed march has caught officials' attention. The health ministry has already met with union reps and promised changes, like raises of up to 50% for night shift workers from January. They've also talked about more funding for the public insurance system.
影响各院财务最严重当然是健保，健保这个总额的这个大饼要扩大，从这边的源头扩大，那将来他们的这个薪水才有可能会提高了。
But so far, the government's only approached unions representing hospital administrators, not frontline healthcare workers. The next question is whether those who say they're in hell have their voices heard too. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Several labor unions rallied in support of migrant workers who are threatening to strike against one of the country's tech giants. Tiffany Wong was there.
Migrant workers and labor unions are gathered here outside Taiwan's Ministry of Labor to protest against one of Taiwan's tech giants, Asus, and its subsidiary. Migrant workers say their jobs are at stake if the company continues with its plan to move operations abroad.
Most of the machines have been shipped to Vietnam already, so they don't have works already. But until now, the Asus group, they always said there's no plan to close the company. There's no plan to dismiss the workers. We think that's only an excuse.
The unions say they're getting nowhere with negotiations, and now they're threatening to go on strike. There are hundreds of thousands of migrant workers in Taiwan, and they often face longer working hours, lower wages, and have less rights than Taiwanese workers. These migrant workers say they've had enough. They're hoping that support from the Ministry of Labor can pressure Asus into responding to their grievances. Justin Wu and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's second geothermal plant is now online. The new facility in northeastern Taiwan can generate enough clean energy to power 1,200 homes. It's one of 9 geothermal sites in development across the country. Taiwan is trying to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels to lower carbon emissions. Thank you for watching Here's What Happened. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these fresh looks served up at the closing ceremony of Taipei Fashion Week. I'm Philip Brossard. Take care and see you next week.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus. Be sure to follow us on social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world.